Welcome back to our hottest sports news bulletin. Organizing a global sporting festival like the 2026 World Cup is a highly complex issue, requiring meticulous preparation, yet right before the opening day, a deeply agonizing problem is unfolding. A problem threatening to destroy all the preparation efforts over the years. The earth is angry, and that wrath is striking directly at the biggest football event on the planet. We expected the most magnificent World Cup in history, with 48 national teams competing across three nations, namely the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Everything seemed ready, from the magnificent billion-dollar stadiums to the cross-border transport infrastructure. However, right at this moment, as the final preparations are taking place, an unprecedented weather disaster is surrounding the entire tournament. The climate crisis is no longer a distant concept confined to scientific research papers. It is manifesting in the flesh, with a blistering heat incinerating all the hopes and excitement of millions of fans. I stand here monitoring the temperature reports sent back from the host cities and cannot help but feel stunned. The numbers are dancing at the red alert level. From the scorching cauldrons in Texas to the stifling heat in Miami, or the thin and fiery atmosphere in Mexico City, everything is sinking into an extreme heat wave. Outdoor temperatures in many places have exceeded 40 degrees Celsius. Meteorological experts continuously issue urgent warnings about deadly heat waves. Imagine how the top players in the world can showcase peak football in an environment like a furnace. Never in the past has a World Cup faced such a brutal natural challenge. Leaked information from national team training camps constantly reports the exhaustion of key strikers. They collapse on the training ground after light warm-up exercises. Sweat soaks them, unable to dry, stinging every muscle. The cooling systems at the stadiums, no matter how modernly invested, are operating beyond their design capacity and constantly malfunctioning due to overload. Natural grass pitches at many venues are showing signs of withering and dying under the scorching sun, despite irrigation systems running day and night. The crisis does not just stop at the grass pitch, but spreads to the entire logistics system serving the tournament. I received countless images capturing exhausted fans struggling to find shade outside the fan zones. Beverage stores sell out within hours of opening. Public transport systems in some major cities are paralyzed because train tracks expand due to the extreme heat. Tens of thousands of volunteers, who are the backbone of the organization, face the risk of heat stroke every single day. Every perfect plan, every detailed schedule mapped out years ago is being torn to shreds by Mother Nature. This is not simply a fleeting extreme weather phenomenon. This is the clearest and most cruel warning bell about climate change eroding every aspect of human life, including sports. What frustrates me the most, and I believe many genuine football fans share this bitter feeling, is the coping attitude of the leaders. When an obvious disaster is unfolding, directly threatening the lives and health of players and fans, the response from the authorities is incredibly slow and indecisive. They try to soothe public opinion with empty and harmless press releases. They use the excuse that this is an uncontrollable objective factor and promise immediate cooling measures. But ladies and gentlemen, are giant misting fans or short water breaks on the pitch enough to fight a global climate crisis? We are witnessing a life and death gamble using the health of the participants. A tournament of historical stature should be a place to honor the beauty of sports, the spirit of solidarity, and human physical strength. Now it is turning into a brutal survival arena against harsh weather. Recently released documentary footage shows that a series of construction workers had to endure terrible working conditions under the scorching sun to meet the final handover deadlines. Their sacrifices seem to be covered up by massive media campaigns promoting a perfect World Cup, but the truth cannot be hidden forever. Social media is exploding with waves of outraged opinions. Environmental activists from all over the world are organizing massive protests right outside the headquarters of international football governing bodies. They demand transparency, a specific action plan, and most importantly, the acknowledgement of responsibility for ignoring climate warnings years ago. This weather crisis did not naturally appear overnight. It is the consequence of a series of wrong decisions of trading the environment for economic gain over a long period. And now the ball of responsibility is being kicked around while the fire of crisis burns ever higher. A stifling atmosphere envelops the entire football world. In-depth analysis from top strategists all point out that the professional quality of the upcoming matches will certainly be severely degraded. There will no longer be spectacular sprints or continuous high pressing for 90 minutes. Instead, it will be a reserved playing style, conserving energy and waiting for opportunities. Football, the king of sports, which highly values dedication and speed, is now bound by the harshest physical limits. The drama on the pitch is in danger of being replaced by the drama of unforeseen medical emergencies. The terrifying silence from the most powerful agencies is gradually becoming the ultimate irresponsibility. Billions of dollars in television rights, millions of tickets sold, massive sponsorship contracts are tying everyone to a relentless machine. They would rather turn a blind eye, accepting to push the most expensive stars in the world into the furnace than postpone or change the organization's schedule. Profits and beautiful financial reports are blinding them to the safety of the participants. I cannot imagine a player collapsing right on live television in front of billions of watching eyes just because of heat exhaustion. That would be a media disaster, an indelible stain on the history of this sport. The promises of a green and environmentally friendly tournament that were once heavily promoted now become the most bitter sarcasm hitting straight in the face of those who once believed. Standing on the threshold of the biggest football festival on the planet, instead of feeling eager and expectant, we are facing extreme anxiety. The velvet curtain is about to be drawn, but behind it is a gloomy and risky prospect. The climate crisis has dealt a fatal blow to the 2026 World Cup, turning this tournament into the cruelest test for global sports management authorities. Will they have the courage to face the truth or continue their irresponsible game of hide and seek? This story is just the tip of the iceberg, and what is happening behind the closed doors of high-level meeting rooms contains many more shocking details. To fully understand the severity of the disaster surrounding the current tournament, we are forced to look back at the golden pages of history and also the scratches in the development of world football. In the past, the World Cup was not simply a matter of competing for a golden trophy with physical strength. It was a magnificent cultural festival favored and protected by nature. Let us look back at the first World Cups of the 21st century to clearly see the contrast. In 2002, Japan and South Korea brought a sports festival full of technological colors and discipline. The weather was a bit humid, but entirely within the limits of human endurance. Following that was Germany in 2006, that was dubbed a brilliant summer fairy tale. The European sky was clear, the weather was ideally cool, the transportation infrastructure and stadiums reached flawless perfection. Everything ran smoothly like a pre-programmed time machine. Those resounding successes planted in the minds of world football leaders an absolute belief that they have the power to create sporting marvels in any culture. But cracks began to appear when they decided to take the round ball beyond its traditional safe zones. Looking at South Africa, in 2010, a new horizon opened up on the dark continent. Despite initial concerns about security and infrastructure, the echoing sound of vuvuzela horns proved that football can take root and bloom in every corner of the earth. However, behind those beautiful films, bitter lessons began to emerge. Giant stadiums costing billions of dollars were abandoned right after the tournament ended, becoming painful monuments of resource waste and misguided direction. Their failure lay in the post-tournament planning vision, not in the harshness of the weather. And then Brazil in 2014 told another highly dramatic story. The land of the samba dance brought an undeniably passionate atmosphere. The ball rolled on the homeland of the most artistic football. But that was also when we clearly saw the dark side of pouring all financial resources into a fleeting month of competition. Localized traffic jams broke out, massive protests erupted on the streets because the people were dissatisfied. They were outraged when the national budget was drained for glamorous sports facilities, while schools and lower-level hospitals were left in ruins. Despite those giant flaws, the natural element was still not out of control. The heat of South America is a characteristic native heat. The teams could still adapt after a period of training. It was not the kind of extreme, deadly weather seen everywhere today. Russia in 2018 continued to reinforce the illusion of the invincible power of global organizers. They created a wonderful World Cup in terms of logistics, free subway trains, operated perfectly magnificent stadiums, and a highly tightened security space. That brilliant organizational success made authorities seemingly believe that any geographical difficulties or distances could be easily leveled by the power of cash flow and modern management technology. But the greatest wake-up call, the clearest omen, rang out in Qatar in 2022. This was the fierce turning point where the decision-makers deliberately ignored or deceived themselves. For the first time in the nearly century-long history of the tournament, a World Cup was forced to change its entire traditional schedule from a fiery summer to a milder winter. Why was there this humiliating, unprecedented concession? The answer is painfully obvious but was deliberately downplayed. The scorching heat of the Middle Eastern desert can drain the strength and kill any creature engaging in high-intensity physical activity outdoors. To fight nature, they spent hundreds of billions of dollars to build giant air conditioning systems blasting cold air directly inside open roof stadiums. That was an incredible technical achievement, an unprecedented display of financial power, but at the same time a highly arrogant defiance against nature. The salvaged success of that tournament was built on a foundation of mountains of money and state-of-the-art technology, covering up the bitter truth that the weather is gradually becoming the most terrifying enemy rather than a romantic backdrop for intense matches. That ultimate arrogance followed the authorities setting foot in North America for the 2026 festival. They blindly believed that the massive economic foundation and the most modern infrastructure in the world of the three host nations, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, would be more than enough to perfectly organize a Summer World Cup once again. They proudly reclaimed the familiar June and July time frame. They drew up a grandiose vision of a borderless football festival where fans could freely travel on expensive commercial flights back and forth between major cities in the blink of an eye. Beautiful plans were brilliantly presented on projector screens, early celebratory handshakes at lavish draw ceremonies, but they arrogantly crossed out the most important variable that turns everything upside down. That is the cruel revenge of Mother Nature. The climate crisis has accelerated with a terrifying momentum, far exceeding all their overly optimistic forecasting models from a few years ago, completely different from host nations in the past. The disaster this time does not lie in political issues. It does not lie in weak physical infrastructure, nor is it due to riots on the streets. The disaster this time strikes straight down from a fiery sky. The current host nations were once extremely proud of their ability to organize superpower sports events. Yet their mighty power grids are staggering and shaking, unable to bear the burden of millions of cooling devices running at full capacity day and night. The asphalt roads that were once great traffic arteries are now warping and melting mushy under unimaginable temperatures. The climate that was once the great companion of football, that once bestowed beautiful sunsets on lush green grass, looking back at the past, to see the chilling contrast. In the past, failures were often only financial or due to localized administrative management mistakes. The desolate stadiums in South Africa or Brazil were, after all, just a painful economic ache for the nation after the final whistle. But the collapse gradually manifesting right before the 2026 World Cup carries the dark color of an imminent survival threat. When the atmosphere becomes stifling, filled with a burning sensation, making it hard to breathe, when warnings about deadly heat surround every urgent news bulletin every hour, then does the round ball still bring the joy of living, or is it just a cruel tool testing the limits of human endurance? The illusion of controlling nature with money and power has completely gone bankrupt and shattered. The glorious picture of the World Cups of the past now turns into a mirror reflecting the fragile complacency of humanity before the irreversible wrath of the earth. The truth is always cruel, and behind the scorching heat that is suffocating the 2026 World Cup is a much darker story. The climate crisis is not an uninvited guest arriving unexpectedly. It is the result of decades of humans destroying nature, draining resources, and ruthlessly discharging emissions into the atmosphere. But the most outrageous thing here is the hypocrisy of the most powerful football leadership apparatus on the planet. They loudly preach about a green, clean, and beautiful tournament, about sustainable development, but they themselves designed a World Cup with the most massive carbon footprint in history. Ladies and gentlemen, look at the organization map of this year's tournament to see the ultimate absurdity. 48 national teams and millions of fans must continuously travel on expensive commercial flights back and forth across three of the largest countries in the world, the United States, Mexico, and Canada. That massive flight distance consumes a colossal amount of fossil fuels, discharging a massive amount of greenhouse gases, directly contributing to the very global warming disaster that is strangling the tournament. This is a deadly loop that they are fully aware of, but deliberately ignore because economic interests obscure their reason. We must boldly tear off the masks of the deceitful media campaigns, trying to whitewash this horrific irresponsibility. The most powerful body of world football constantly issues beautiful reports about their use of renewable energy and purchasing carbon credits to offset emissions. But those are just illusory numbers on paper, a cheap magic trick to blind the public. The naked truth is that they ignored a series of stern warnings from the top meteorological experts in the world years ago. From the moment the North American bidding dossier was submitted, scientists painted a terrible scenario about extreme heat waves in the summer of 2026. Those thick warning documents were stuffed deep into dark drawers, treated as voices hindering brilliant commercial development. They closed their eyes and signed lucrative sponsorship contracts with giant energy and aviation corporations, the very main culprits causing climate change. An ironically bitter situation is unfolding right before our eyes when the tournament being incinerated by climate change is sponsored by the very creators of the climate change disaster. When the disaster truly strikes, the evasive attitude of the leaders further fans the flames of anger among genuine fans. While the players are squeezing out their last drops of sweat in stifling cauldrons directly facing the risk of heat stroke, the high-ranking officials are sipping expensive champagne inside cool business class suites. They are completely isolated from the cruel reality unfolding right under the grass and on the fiery stands. The press releases issued from luxurious headquarters are filled with empty, emotionless words, completely avoiding the admission of strategic mistakes. They push the blame onto local organizing committees, blaming unexpected weather changes without a single official apology sent to those suffering the direct consequences. That apathy is chillingly cold, completely contrasting with the boiling temperatures out there. Leaked information from dressing rooms and field medical areas is exposing a terrifying reality that the official broadcasting system deliberately hides. The number of emergency cases due to heat stroke exhaustion and cardiovascular issues is multiplying exponentially after every match. Sports doctors are working under constant red alerts, issuing urgent recommendations demanding the tournament be suspended when the temperature crosses the danger threshold. However, the cry for medical help is drowned out under the pressure of billion-dollar television rights. The giant commercial wheel is not allowed to stop regardless of human lives being placed on the bet. Major broadcasters do not want to see black screens or disrupted match schedules. They force players to take the field like mindless machines in an environment where even breathing the air becomes difficult. Football, the sport born to bring joy, is now turned into a brutal tool draining human strength to serve the greed of a minority. The cowardly evasion does not just stop at ignoring the safety of athletes, but is also a blatant betrayal of millions of fans. Passionate football lovers saved every penny traveling thousands of miles to join the biggest festival on the planet. But what they receive in return is cruel, physical torment in fan zones lacking drinking water with no shade to fight the deadly heat. Their desperate cries for help on social media are suppressed by media algorithms, covered up by flashy, fake promotional videos. The management agency is trying to build a media fortress strangling every critical voice, covering up the dark truth about a World Cup standing on the brink of a humanitarian disaster. But paper can never wrap fire, and those desperate cover-up efforts only make the public anger wait for the day to explode violently. The core drama of today's bulletin does not lie in the beautiful goals or spectacular comebacks on the pitch. The most cruel drama lies in the naked truth being exposed in the fierce media war between environmental activists and the giant power machine trying to protect economic interests. Evading responsibility, hypocrisy, and bottomless greed have created a cruel caricature of the modern football industry. A global tournament that should be a symbol of solidarity has now become a heartbreaking testament to the corruption of power. The climate crisis has dealt a fatal blow, stripping away the glamorous shell, exposing a system rotting from the inside. And when the truth is brought to light, we, the genuine fans, cannot continue to close our eyes and be complicit, allowing the king of sports to wither away under this brutal heat. Ladies and gentlemen, after we have plunged together into the deep eye of the storm of anger, stripping away the darkest corners of responsibility, denial, and bottomless greed, now is the time we must calmly assess the whole situation. Anger is a necessary reaction to awaken human conscience. But anger alone cannot salvage the terrible situation of this historic tournament. We cannot just stand silently in shock and despair watching the biggest football festival on the planet slide on the edge of an apocalyptic disaster. The most urgent question raised right now, a vital question demanding an immediate answer, is whether there is still a blood path, a real way out to rescue the 2026 World Cup from the wrath of Mother Nature. The answer is absolutely yes, but it requires unprecedented courage, a comprehensive and bloody major surgery from those holding the supreme power of the World Football Federation. It is time they are forced to cast aside their vain pride, throw away short-term profit calculations to place human life and the future of football at the absolute highest position. First of all, we need an emergency rescue plan right on the pitch happening in every minute and every second right now. The immediate and most vital solution is the total restructuring of the match timeframes. We absolutely cannot continue to push players onto the field at 2 in the afternoon or 4 in the afternoon when the sun scorches the skin and the grass surface temperature can reach levels that melt sports shoe soles. Organizers must immediately reschedule all matches to late evening timeframes or even play at night when the temperature has completely cooled down. This will certainly shatter the golden broadcasting schedules of major television networks, severely affecting global advertising revenues worth billions of dollars. But ladies and gentlemen, we would rather accept a cruel decline in economic benefits. We would rather stay up all night to watch football than witness medical tragedies happening right on live broadcast before billions of eyes. The absolute safety of the athletes must be considered the sole guiding principle for every decision right now. Besides, the regulations on medical care and player health protection on the field must be rewritten immediately without going through any cumbersome procedures. The current cooling breaks are far too short and completely ineffective against the scorching heat. We need longer break times, more frequent appearances, and the field preventive medical system must be equipped 10 times more modernly than it is currently. Every participating team must be granted more flexible substitution rights, not limited to rigid numbers, to protect legs that are crumbling from exhaustion. The volunteer force and spectators at the fan zones need to be provided with free drinking water, and specialized heat dissipating sheltered areas must be established to prevent heat exhaustion due to dehydration. However, those temporary firefighting measures can only solve the tip of the problem. In the long run, the only way out and the strategic way to reshape world football is a true green revolution, not deceitful media campaigns. The Federation must immediately establish an independent committee to monitor the climate crisis with the participation of the world's leading scientists, not economic lobbying experts. From the next tournament onwards, every bidding dossier must pass the harshest survival tests regarding the climate. If a nation or region cannot prove its ability to guarantee absolute safety against heat waves, storms, or extreme weather patterns, that dossier must be immediately rejected with no chance for negotiation. Furthermore, the widely dispersed organizational model stretching across multiple countries and time zones as currently seen must be permanently terminated. Forcing millions of people and thousands of tons of equipment to move continuously by air is the most cruel act of murdering the environment. We need to return to concentrated tournaments within a narrow geographical scope, optimize public transportation using clean energy, and maximize the use of recycled materials in building sports facilities. Any billion-dollar stadium erected must account for a life cycle of hundreds of years, serving the local community closely instead of becoming soulless, rusted, and desolate concrete blocks after a brief, brilliant month. The World Football Federation also needs to establish a massive climate compensation fund extracted directly from television rights revenues to assist developing countries in overcoming the consequences of climate change. We also need to reconsider the power and authority of the fans in this life and death battle. The voices of millions of genuine sports lovers worldwide are the sharpest weapons to force the emotionless power machines to change. Instead of despairing and anger, let us turn our utmost frustration into practical action. Boycott sponsoring brands that ignore environmental responsibilities, spread messages of protecting the Earth's life across all social media platforms, and use the power of consumers to demand a clean and sustainable football industry. Football cannot be separated from society, and when the earth is screaming for help, the ball cannot roll in cold and soulless indifference. Try closing your eyes and visualizing a brighter future where the World Cup truly becomes a magnificent symbol of harmony between humanity and nature. A tournament where organizers proudly boast about the Clean Air Index, about stadiums operating entirely on solar power, and about new forests planted to pay tribute to Mother Nature after every goal scored. A tournament where football returns exactly to its sacred core essence, connecting hearts, blurring boundaries, and honoring the fierce vitality of life. The climate crisis in North America this year is a painful blow, a freezing splash of water thrown straight at the arrogance of humanity. But if we know how to distill those bitter pains into blood and bone lessons, then this very cruel disaster is a golden opportunity, the greatest turning point to rebirth the entire football religion. All great changes start from the darkest and most desperate hours. As long as those responsible dare to face the bitter truth, dare to act with both conscience and intellect, I firmly believe that the round ball will find a brilliant way out for itself and continue to light the flame of proud belief for billions of people on this blue planet. And so the shocking story of a magnificent sports festival ruthlessly punished by Mother Nature has gradually come to a close, leaving within each of us profound moments of reflection. From the initial boiling eagerness to the stunned shock facing the deadly heat from the peak of anger at the cowardly evasion of the highest authorities to the fierce hope for a path of uncompromising, comprehensive reform. The emotional roller coaster journey we just went through is not confined to a regular sports bulletin. It is a genuine miniature painting of the era where humanity's arrogant desire to conquer is colliding with the harshest limits of the natural world. Every sporting event, no matter how grand and luxurious, is just a tiny, hopeless grain of sand against the cruel, raging power of the universe. Now, as the ball must still continue to roll on the withering and dying grass, we can only send our most sincere prayers for the absolute health and safety of the warriors on the pitch and the passionate fans directly facing countless dangers. These unprecedented events will surely be forever etched in human history as the sternest, most cruel warning about the mission to protect our shared ecosystem. Our special sports bulletin today ends here. If you feel that the shocking information and sharp perspectives I just shared bring profound values, do not hesitate to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss any latest developments. Your enthusiastic companionship and support are the greatest motivation for me to continue bringing dramatic, authentic, and highly humane sports stories. Goodbye, wishing you peace, and see you again in the next fascinating bulletins.